Okay, so this is a NB Miata, second generation, and I've had some questions regarding the whole supercharger setup and what all that entails, and how to go around some of the problems that it presents without a standalone engine management system. And so that's what I'm going to get into because it'll be a lot easier to explain in a video than it would be in just trying to voice it out. So here we have the engine bay of a supercharged 1.8 liter Miata. You have a couple of different options when you do a supercharger. You can either do the hot side, which is right on top of the exhaust manifold, or the cold side, which is right over here where the intake is. So there's a couple of different benefits here. The cold side supercharger is obviously direct on to the intake manifold, and therein you don't have to worry about the major issue that exists, or at least not so much with the major issue that exists with a supercharged setup. That issue that I'm talking about is actually the idle control. So you have traditionally down here the IAC, which is actually what tells the engine, okay, I'm now off gas, and so this is where idle is supposed to be at. The problem is that traditionally with the hot side supercharger, you have your supercharger, which then you have a couple of different cooling options for the air. Some people use like a liquid cooled heat exchanger, but the best bang for your buck, I think, as far as power output is going to be with a front mount intercooler. And so the front mount intercooler, the issue that you have with that is that you have all this extra plumbing and then the volume of the intercooler itself, which is air that the IAC never was intended to handle. And so that volume, it now hits the computer, and the factory computer says, I don't know what to do with that. And so what will happen is if you come off throttle suddenly into your clutch and the RPMs drop rapidly, the IAC can't respond to that volume of airflow quickly enough, and so what will happen is the car will stall out. And so that is the benefit if you have a cold side supercharger, and or if you did have a hot side supercharger but didn't have a front mount intercooler but instead like a heat exchanger or something in between. There are a couple of different ways around that, and what you could do is operate in such a way that the IAC still reads that the volume is normal. So here's the thing. On the hot side supercharger, you actually have your throttle body, which is down in there. And so with the throttle body down there, obviously it's necessary that it's there, or else you're just sucking in tons of air. So that butterfly, when that opens up, obviously letting air in, and that's how that operates. So you need to have a throttle body there. And then usually over here, what would happen is you would have a dummy throttle body. There's nothing to it. It's just a plate. And I actually have the dummy throttle body, but in an attempt to resolve the issue, I'm sorry, there's a diesel truck that's just started up. I don't know how loud it's going to be on this video, but in an attempt to resolve that, I actually put on an actual throttle body that has all of the sensors and everything intact. The downside to doing that, you'll actually notice that I have this throttle body locked open and then this cable is just hanging out. You can actually have this operate as per normal in that throttle body is functional. And then the way that you utilize that is that you link, and you'll notice that I've got this line that runs around. You link the actual throttle cable to the second throttle body as well, and that eliminates the stalling issue entirely. However, it doubles the amount of effort necessary to press on the gas pedal, which if you're not very good about your throttle control, then you may wind up burning out at every intersection or stoplight that you come to, because you put a lot on the gas and then don't compensate or overcompensate with the clutch. So that said, because my wife was driving the car for a little while, I just locked the throttle body open so it operates just like the dummy throttle body does. And in the interim, there's an IAC that's been relocated. And so it does, in this exact configuration, it does have the stalling issue, because this throttle body is operating just like a dummy throttle body, but it really is fully functional. In the event that you wanted to drive it but just happen to have double the throttle pressure, what you would simply do is relieve the spring on this that's holding the throttle body open, adjust the cable, appropriately. I think it's actually perfectly adjusted now, so that the two throttle body cables are actually synchronized and it lines up, and then obviously reconnect the sensors here, which are otherwise connected elsewhere. And then instead of having your pressure having to go through the vacuum on the bypass valve, it would be then the routed from this throttle body, you would route it over to somewhere else on the vacuum system so that it still operated appropriately. It's pretty basic. But that said, let's actually get in the car and drive so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. And then obviously colder air, you happen to have the issue can be more prominent, during the cold season, which is why realistically you'd want to run the true dual throttle body setup, because it's a lot easier to manage. But again, you have that issue with a stiffer pedal. So we give it power, give it time to prime the fuel pump. It's an aftermarket fuel pump. It's the Whirlboro, the 255 liter. They've got wideband to keep an eye on things, and that'll level out. But anyway, and then boost gauge, oil pressure gauge. A lot of people don't know this, but the oil pressure gauge that exists on the second generation Miata actually does not function. It's very digital. It's either on or off. You'll notice that I have a blinking seat belt light, or not seat belt, but airbag, because it doesn't have the airbag. This is the way that I got the car. I found the airbag in the trunk, but I wasn't able to source a factory steering wheel, and it didn't bug me enough to bother going to get one. So we will back up. You might hear a little bit of chassis noise. I need to tighten up the X brace that's underneath. And let's go for a drive. I'll turn my headlights on. And so we're gonna drive. And what you'll notice is that I'm not really gonna get into it too much right now, because until the car warms up. But let's hope any police don't go by me and think that I'm just talking on my phone. What you'll notice, what I was talking about, there's specifically a couple of people have asked me, what I'm talking about is learning the throttle, and that is that to keep the RPMs from rapidly dropping, you want to use engine braking instead of just the direct braking, and the way to do that is just simply don't clutch until it's necessary to do so for coming to a complete stop. And I'm sorry, I'm holding this instead of talking is proving to be a little more attention-oriented than I expected. Hold on just a second. There's cars coming in. I want them to see that I'm holding a camera and filming. Okay. Anyway, so what we do, as said, right here, I haven't clutched yet, and we're just letting the RPMs drop slower, and then now I've clutched. So, and then that's it. You just drive around, and then when you're out and about, just don't, I don't know, some people don't do this, some people do, they clutch immediately. They just, when they come down to, like, for example, a red light or a stop sign, or for whatever reason that you need to decelerate and stop, what they'll do is they'll just simply clutch and go into neutral. A school of thought there is that it's cheaper to replace brakes than it is to replace a clutch, but in this particular instance, doing that, just clutching in and then braking instead of engine braking will result in the engine stalling, and it becomes more prominent. It's right around about 1,000 RPM or so is when it's safe to clutch in for this particular setup. But let's go down the road some more. I'm gonna actually show you what happens, I think. So we're gonna go, I was out driving a little bit earlier to get lunch, so we heated up pretty quickly. But anyway, now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna clutch in right now. And you'll note that we have now stalled because I just clutched and immediately went to neutral instead of engine braking. So I'm going to go ahead and start the car again, and we'll take off. And for people that habitually, just clutch, go into neutral, and then ride their brakes, that's what I say, learning the throttle. That, that's become so ingrained, so habitual to them that they do that rather than, engine braking, which is necessary here, which, let's see, we're going to come up to another place where I'm going to need to stop. This is the most drawn out video to explain something with lots of ums and uhs going on that I've ever seen, but bear with me. We're going to turn into the neighborhood. There's an X brace that's on the chassis for this car, and at very specific reverberation levels, you can actually hear that X brace tapping the exhaust because it's tapping the frame because I need to bolt it on. But anyway, you'll note here, we're coming in, we're at 1,000 RPM, I clutch, and we haven't stalled. But that's it. If you clutch in instantly and then go into neutral rather than engine braking, more often than not, without setting it up under the true throttle body, the double throttle body anyway, then what'll happen is you'll stall out. So that is that, I guess. Yeah, I'm gonna end the video.